All right, we are live once again, Wednesday, 1 p.m. I've got three special guests today. And, we're hoping if you're on the call right now and you're watching, chime in, let us know where you're watching from. But what I'm going to do today is a lot of people tune in and they want impact and they want value right away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to intermix the introductions. And some of you have already met Andrew and Tyler and DePauli and myself on other videos. So we're going to weave the introductions in later, but let's start out with a bang. Let's go, so today we're going to talk about how to get a job in data. And DePauli has been experienced this from she's doing a master's at Purdue right now, and she's doing virtual career fairs, which she said can be chaotic. Andrew Hoekstra has spent a lot of time at, career services at Michigan Tech, I believe, right?
Yep.
So he's got some insight there. I've spent a lot of time with career services at Rose-Hulman, where I went for undergrad. I also did some hiring of people when I worked, in the corporate world about, 8 years ago now. So I have insight from that side of things. Oh, and Andrew's got some insight he worked behind the counter at career fairs. So he understands how, what that side of things is like, which we've already had some fun stories there. And then Tyler, so, you were just talking about the shift towards at-home working, virtual, and with data, you can do that. And Andrew, you were talking about, Azure credentials or whatever. You log into the cloud right now and you get access to all the data. So we can do a lot of the work remotely. So that's really shifting things. And then if we have some time, Tyler, we're going to, maybe we'll talk about the new, you're in your new bird watching room, right? So
Yeah.
So we got some insights if we have a little fun time at the end. So let's kick it off. I'm going to kick it off with my experience with cold calling and following up on calls. So quick story is I was at Rose-Hulman and they had a career services office, and I would walk in. I made it a point. I probably discovered their office maybe sophomore year, halfway through. And I would walk in, and it was interesting because they had a little cubby, and in each cubby was a little white clipboard. And in the clipboard was interview slots. And I would go in and I would look at them, and I would see that nobody had signed up for these companies that were coming in. And I was like, wow, what a great opportunity. I would just sign up right here. And then I figured out that they would call you like a week later. It's like, hey, you signed up, come in and interview. And I got all this practice, doing interviews for all kinds of different companies. And I got to learn what kind of questions they ask, what kind of questions I could ask. I mean, it was just great market feedback, right, on how people were doing this. And then the other thing I did was they had, at the time, this is kind of dating me now, but they had a library in the back, and they had a bank of phones, dial phones. And they gave you a code because I believe back then you had to pay for across state calls. So they paid for those, or international companies even, so you went to the front. It's like, can I get a code for a free call? And they're like, here's your code. And then I would go back, and sometimes I would make a list of companies and cold call them about internships, or I would call companies as a follow-up. And I learned one really important thing was during those times was, it was super scary for me because I'm like, they haven't called me back in a couple of weeks. Let's say I did an interview, and here I had to call that guy that he gave me his card. I was like, he could say like, we're not going to hire you or whatever. But, I was scared of the rejection and stuff. But I kind of made a bulleted list of what I was going to say. Is like, hey, do you need more information from me? And a lot of times I got on the call and they were like, oh, thanks for calling me back. You're the only interviewee that has called me back. Thanks for doing that. And you know what? I do need something for you. I've been meaning to write this email, but I've been so busy. Send me your resume again because I need, this or that, or I misplaced your resume, right? And you put it in, and then you were in the door that way. Like you went to the top of their list because you took a little bit of effort to do this scary thing of calling them, right? So, yeah, if you guys have, let's go to Andrew real quick, and we'll get some insights. So that's my story about cold calls and following up and how that made a difference. But Andrew, maybe talk about your experience with let's talk career fairs. How that experience was like.
Yeah. So I spent a decent amount of time early in my career volunteering within the companies I worked for to help their HR team handle this large influx of resumes and candidates that you get. Because a lot of times HR doesn't always have the technical knowledge to be able to parse out good candidates versus not as good candidates. And let me tell you, it is a practice and endurance when you're having these on-site, in-person career fairs, because you're basically standing in a very warm suit along with a whole bunch of other people doing the same thing for like 6 to 8 hours. And me being more of an introvert, what was particularly challenging is 90% of candidates would walk up and hand you their resume, and that's about it. And it was up to me to go and try to draw out information from them. I'd take a couple of seconds to quick scan the resume for a few keywords to know if they knew what they were applying to. But yeah, it was just such a draining process to have to like pull information out of candidates. So the few times, maybe roughly 10%, that a candidate comes up, has a sales pitch ready to go, and they can guide me through their resume with some sort of cohesive story, pretty much every time they would go to a callback pile as opposed to a reject pile, because yeah, they're able to communicate, they're able to tie together their experiences in a way that is cohesive and engaging. And usually that ended up sparking some very interesting conversations, which made it really easy for me to ask very pointed questions to make sure that they had the experience we were looking for. So yeah, that was some of my early career times, is standing in massive career fairs and trying to figure out how do we find these best candidates when we're having to go through so many different resumes.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then you were saying there were bins behind you, right? They were like callback bin, and then maybe not quite a good fit. And then you said there were other bins sometimes that.
Yeah, different companies had different processes. So in some cases, there was like, we've got a sheet for signing up interviews right there on the spot for very obvious candidates that we want to interview. And then there's hey, we're going to go back through the empty interview slots, and we're going to go through this short list of people to fill those slots in a callback fashion. And then there's the pile that are going to be no's, and maybe they get entered into an ATS system at the end of the day, maybe not, who knows, but they're just essentially passed on the spot.
Wow. So, yeah. And I remember seeing those bins. Yeah. And you're trying to make those judgments on the fly. And that's great advice. Is, it's a long day for you, and the one person that empathized and figured out, that they had to deliver information. It's kind of sales. I think, Tyler, was it you that said that? That's where you're learning sales. Yeah, you're learning sales for the first time. Is you're trying to add value to this person who's standing there for 8 hours trying to pull information, and that one person that figured out, or the group of people that said, here's the information you need so you don't have to sit here bored for 8 hours, is the one that goes to the call pile, right? So that is super interesting. Yeah.
And you can tell the
candidates,
the candidates that come up that actually know about the company are the ones that are able to spin their story as to how they can add value to the organization, as opposed to the other ones that just walk up and it's like, so what are you wanting to apply for? Well, I don't know. What jobs do you have? I don't even know where to begin. So we'll make this painful process go quick.
I think that's probably been one of the big differentiators in previous job interviews that I've gone on, is taking the 5 to 10, even 20 minutes to look at their website and go through the about page, try and figure out what they're about, right? And if it's data specific, if it's a company that kind of their core product or their core specialization is in analytics or AI or even just data, try and spin something up that can show how you can support what they're doing, right? What their cause is. And I think if you can relate and if you can align your own values with that company, that's the first key step in helping them understand that you're an asset that they want.
Yeah, no, I've found that so often. So 10 years ago, I was, I was interviewing people, and, if we would bring them in for interviews sometimes, and, I was so surprised at how many people came in, and had no idea what the company was about. They had not gone to the website. So if you just take that little bit of time, go to the website, go through the job posting and look at it, you can really make a difference in terms of, helping the person sitting on the other side to, categorize you and make it a quick process for them to say, okay, you're a good match or you're not a good match. So no, that's some great insight. Yeah. And Dipali, we're going to go for you in a second. So, and then Tyler, if you have any insights to add back, we'll jump back to you too.
Sure.
But Dipali, if you unmute, you have some interesting experience because you've been to a couple of virtual career fairs lately, which is something I never experienced. I was just telling Tyler and Andrew, when I did career fairs, you'd print out a stack of resumes, and you had to go and buy the really nice paper, the resume paper, and then you got a nice rose, college leather bound, and then you walk around and hand those out. And then you would watch, somebody like Andrew, read through, talk to you, and then put them in these bins. And you're like, I hope that's the callback bin. So Dipali, tell us about virtual career fairs, how they work. And you said they were a little bit chaotic, right? Which is interesting. Oh, I can't hear you.
Well, not all of them. So I have seen a few.
There's a little bit of a lag, but I think you're okay.
Okay. So I think I'll start first about how career fairs these days are a little different from the career fairs that you have faced. So we have a university portal on which the career fairs are put up. So I think the first step would be to go to the career fair and to see all the employers that are going to be coming in. We can also filter all the employers based on their market, based on the jobs that they have right now, based on the requirements that they have. Do they require 3-4 years of experience, or are they accepting freshmen? Or if you want an internship, and all those filters. So you can select a few companies that you think you are the best for and then approach them, which is a good practice instead of just showing up to the first company that you see at the career fair. So that gives you a chance to go to their website and see more about that company after you've filtered down. Talking about virtual career fairs, this process about research remains the same. The only difference is that you do not have to stand in long queues, and you do not meet the employer face to face. You just see them through a chat window. And sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's not such a good thing. The good thing is that we don't have to suit up and wait in line for a very long time. And there are a few employers that are not very actively looking for new employees. They often say like, oh, nice. They will just look at your resume for a couple of minutes and they'll be like, very nice, go to our website and apply. I mean, if I had to do that, why would I waste some 10-15 minutes pitching to that employer? So the good thing about virtual career fairs is that if they are not actively recruiting, what they can just say is that here's my website, you can go and apply or see the jobs there. That saves a lot of time for the employers and the students as well. The thing that I did not like much about virtual career fairs is the fact that we did not get a chance to talk face to face, because very often, like Andrew said, it's about how you can have a conversation and make that link between the company and your experience. I have not been to a whole lot of career fairs, but the ones that I went to, I think it was not about how good my elevator pitch was, about then everything that I have done in the past and just putting that on the interviewer, like, hey, this is all that I have done, these are all my projects. It was more about finding that common link and pitching about that. I remember one particular interview that I had. I did my usual background stuff and all, but the thing that really clicked was both of us had this common idea about a plastic segregation robot. And I talked about a project that I had worked on back in my undergrad. It was a complete failure, but then we just bounced off ideas how plastic can be segregating, what were his thoughts, and the kind of sensor that he was using, and the kind of sensors that I had in mind. And that conversation was completely irrelevant to the job posting that I was applying for. But because, he saw me as a problem solver, as someone who is passionate about something and wants to solve a problem. And that really worked well. I think that is very important. So I think that is something that career fairs that are virtual are a little difficult for that type of interviews. I do remember there was one virtual career fair that had video conversations, but it was difficult to log in and wait in the queue for that. I remember when I had logged in, it was a working day for me since I'm returning this semester. I logged in at, I think, some 3 p.m. and the waiting time was between 3 to 6 hours, and they were closing at 5 p.m. So I did not get a chance to talk to them at all.
Wow.
Yeah, I think because I can imagine that there can be technical difficulties when they are interviewing people just virtually, and it might take a longer time as compared to standing in the queue. And sometimes you can just look behind, the queue is going a little too long, and maybe they change their tactics a little. Maybe Andrew can tell us more about it.
Yeah, keeping an eye on the queue is definitely a strategy that is used because, you want to give everybody a fair shot, right, as much as possible. But it's really nice when the queue's nice and short and you can spend a little more time talking with somebody.
Yeah, no, that's a good, wow. So keeping an eye on the queues, virtual fairs not having queues because you can schedule. Those are some interesting insights, and then you can pick your companies, but there's still some companies that you don't have insight into the queue, and they may be trying to close up or they're not as interested. And so how do you spend your time with those, because you don't have those as many queues maybe in a virtual, is kind of what you're saying. So really, really interesting insights. And I've just had that experience. Yesterday I had a virtual parent teacher conferences, and it was great because, before, if you go to a live one, you had to wait for the other people. But I had one teacher who was like, Mr. Elwood, your time is up and I'm disconnecting you. Click. And so the people behind, after me didn't have to wait because I couldn't chat and keep them waiting. So with virtuals, the timing management is an interesting concept, but you don't have some of the visual cues, which is interesting. So I want to visit an idea, because Tyler, you said you've never been to a career fair, correct?
Nope.
So I want to ask you about your experiences with interviews, how you got them, why you chose not to, because did you find a tip or a way in that was different from career fairs? And then, so that'll be your question. But Dipali, your comment about finding something that person can relate to. I read somewhere that, you make judgments on people based on, trust and shared interest. And if you have shared interest and trust, and I heard sometimes within the first minute, people, and we can ask Andrew this, but they're already making judgments on you, and sometimes you can already kind of tell if they're ready to take you to the next step or hire you. So I've always found that, finding something in common with that person and having that chat, and I've had the most success with that with interviews. Is like you talk on a topic that you're both passionate and interested about, and they see who you really are, and then you end up getting the job, and you're like, I didn't even talk about the the job itself, but you made a personal connection with that person. And I think that's really, really important advice, because I think that still happens. I think people hire people that they trust, they see they have similar interests and passions, and they have something in common with them. So
that is what hired me, right?
Yeah, exactly. We were working on a project together. We loved data. We both had a great interest, and you saw, the value in my company, and you were like, I want to work for you. So this actually happened. Dipali, I was like, Dipali, I'm just me, and would you want to work for a bigger company I can refer you to? And she's like, no, I want to work with you because we have shared interests. So yeah, that's a great data point, and I think that's important for a lot of people is, shared interest, human trust, human relationships.
Yes.
Still account for so much. And it's harder in the virtual world because you can't see a lot of it. And I think that's why video is so powerful. So Tyler, give us some insights. I'm going to shift to you because you made an interesting comment. You have never been to a career fair.
No. And I think some of that was the college that I went to. So my undergrad was at Baker College of Clinton Township.
Okay.
And for a lot of those years, I was head down in my books, studying, but also working a lot as well. So I had a lot of kind of odd jobs while I was in school. And so I didn't have a lot of opportunities to go out and network in the same ways that maybe a traditional student might, that's either at Purdue or Michigan Tech. So like I said, I was working pretty much full time most of my college career. So the biggest thing for me was kind of getting my foot in the door, entry level, and just building out the network as much as you could. Not just making friends, right? But actually showcasing your work to the folks that, might hire you in the future. And so for me, I found that networking was a whole lot more important than the career fair, because I knew that I had more time to demonstrate skills and behaviors for someone that I was networking with or collaborating with than it was in a 1 or 2 minute speech. So really for me, it was initially more about, I didn't find a lot of value in career fairs.
Yeah.
It was more getting my foot in the door somewhere and building out a network and career from there. So I focused a lot on networking with people and making sure that my work was well known, and I did a good job with it.
Oh, wow. So those are some huge pieces of advice. And I'm gonna branch into some stuff. So you said you did a lot more networking, and maybe we'll swing back to you on which groups you utilized to network and how you built that brand and how you built your story. But that leads me into that triggered something, which is what I found was really helpful was the career services said, Charles, read this book. And here's a list of questions called, there's a style of interviewing called behavioral interviewing. And that ties into what Tyler is talking about is people don't want to see a resume with just a bulleted list of points. They want you to more demonstrate and paint a picture of how you would solve problems. And this is what Dipali was saying too, is they want to know that you can solve problems, you can diagnose problems, and they want you to demonstrate with a picture or a story, paint a picture of how you as a person can solve their problems. And, I learned, I think it was called the STAR method.
Yep.
So Tyler, Dipali, everyone's nodding, we know of it. And I hope, anybody out there that isn't aware of this, I use it now for storytelling on my YouTube videos. And it is phenomenal because you go through the basic storytelling methods, and I've read somewhere that humans love a good story because if you paint a picture in somebody's head, we're such visual animals that story sticks. And it, like Tyler, like you just said, if you can paint a picture and tell somebody with a very memorable story with specifics, then forever going forward, they're going to see your face and they're going to be like, that's that guy that told me that story that solved that problem. That was amazing. So I want to hire that guy. So the next time they think of a person that's good at problem solving, you know, the picture pops up in their head of Tyler and it's like, that's the guy. I'll call him. And I would just want to reiterate, and maybe we can tell some stories about this, but so the STAR method, I think, was a situation. You see a situation. You may not understand the underlying problem, but then you diagnose it, and then you define I forget what the T stands for, but you kind of define the problem. You define the problem statement, and then you analyze it, and you come up with a solution. And then the R, which is really, really important, they said, was a lot of people skip it. I think I read too that people do the STA, and then they're like, here's the problem, and then here's what I did. And then they don't give the results, which is I save the company tens of thousands of dollars, or I improve this process so people didn't spend hours doing this anymore. And when you paint that picture of a specific problem you solve for somebody in their head, they remember that for a long time, right? So maybe we go round table. So all of us are nodding, and maybe we talk a little bit about, has that method impacted you? Did you use it? Did you see good results? And I don't know if somebody's got a good story. So I'll let you raise your hand and I'll throw you on the screen. How about that?
Yeah. So after doing career fair stuff, more recently, I've been interviewing on site at companies when I wasn't an independent consultant. And we started settling on a method of interview for technical interviews that pretty well mirrored that STAR approach, except we had them sort of do it real time, where we would take a problem that we were actually working on as an engineering team and, strip away anything that could be, confidential information or whatnot, and throw it in front of the candidate and say, what would you do? Right? Like it can get a little dangerous where like software developers are sometimes asked to write code as part of their application process, and they're essentially solving problems for the company for free, which I think is a terrible practice. But using your current problems as a way to see how somebody assesses that situation, as well as what kind of questions they ask, that's what I'm looking for in all of those things is what questions are you asking? Because that kind of culminates all the stuff that you have in your experience, your previous results, your previous approaches, your ability to tie those previous experiences to your current situation. It helps show a lot of the context that you have for a problem. So yeah, I applied it myself when applying for jobs in the past. And I'd say some of the best responses I got to that were when I actually talked about project failures. Right?
Yeah.
Because everybody likes to talk about project successes, but you learn so much more, and it's actually somewhat unexpected for you to say, hey, here's where I failed and here's what I learned from it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's an interesting one, Andrew, and because I saw those behavioral questions in that career services list is when did you fail? What did you, but what did you do about it? So I think that's the biggest part is because when you can assess a situation and admit failure, but say, hey, I learned from it, and then I apply that learning. And then even the next step is, so then I went to this next company and I learned from that past experience and I didn't do that again. And I made, this turn into a result because I've seen this failure before. When you can apply it like that and tell that story, it's absolutely incredible in painting that picture in the interviewer's head, right? Of you really understand how to attack problems, how to define problems. So yeah, interesting. So Dipali or Tyler, do you have, are you aware, Dipali, it sounds like you've heard of STAR. So maybe we'll go to you real quick. And then do they teach you this in college, or did you find out about it on your own, or how did you figure out, about behavioral interviewing and demonstrating, problem solving and painting a picture?
I had heard about it before, but in our university in MEM, we have these sessions for behavioral interviews and all of that. There are a few that Eric has conducted before, and we have heard a lot about STAR. I am not sure if I have applied that during my interviews. Sometimes I have, but sometimes I have not. So I know about it, but when I have been to interviews, I have just been more into the conversation and less thinking about applying the tools that I have. So
Right.
I don't know. I don't think I've applied that yet.
That's, I mean,
Interesting.
so
Yeah,
I would say I think in every interview I've ever had, STAR was kind of the important framework to follow. It was a big part of the interviews when I was at GM. And we had career classes because Baker College's their big thing is education for adults and professionals, and really ensuring that the classwork is driven a lot by what you'll experience in the workplace. So there's a big push for kind of a formulistic approach to answering behavioral questions. And I kind of formulate my resume like that too. I tend to put projects and results on my resume instead of kind of tasks per se. I think that is something different that not a lot of people would think to put on there. But I structure lines on the resume a lot like how you would structure STAR. And you capture everything that they might be looking for, because to me, I think that communicates that you're a results-oriented person. You're someone that really puts yourself into situations where you're driving the most value for the organization. And so you should showcase your history of doing that to your prospective employers. So I think in terms of getting a data job or a job in data analytics, the mechanics really aren't different. Our tool sets are just different, right? We're just using data to better tell our stories, right? They're not so subjective. They're more based in the real world. There's measurement to it, right? So I think, one of the guys I used to work with, or used to be my boss, Mark Deppy, he really pushed us to be data storytellers when we were engineering. So we weren't just throwing pieces of data at engineers or managers or leaders. It was, how does the data fit the story or the timeline that we're wanting to convey? And I think for anyone, whether you're getting a job in data analytics or not, really work on your storytelling. Pick a time in your life that you found really challenging, or a big project that you want to focus on. And there's tons of different things that you can draw out of those stories, even just for one interview. So it pays to brainstorm those things ahead of time, for sure.
Yeah, no, that's great points. Storytelling, and then I'm going to bring up Matthew Carmen in Seattle. Great points. We live in a world of stories. Everyone has to make sure you paint a picture that is memorable. Matt's a friend in my Avi Singh program. So Tyler, like you said, if you paint a story and your resume, what's incredible is your resume is these stories and these problems. And I've gone through piles of resumes before, and the problem with just listing out tasks is I'm trying to read through these resumes and trying to figure out if you, as a person out there, can solve the problems I'm having. But to write it in a way that you're talking about, to have, problem. Here's the problem. Here's how I resolved it. Here's the results. I can see your behavior, your logic now, and I can look through your problems and see if any relate to us. And then that makes for a great conversation in the interview, right? Because a lot of times when I was reading through resumes, it was like, I'm looking for, more insight into your logic and your problem solving skills. And it sounds like you have kind of stepped ahead of that game and put it all in your resume so that, a hiring manager like me wouldn't have to do that. And that leads me to another story is when I was, I was hiring project managers. I used to manage a project management team. I remember all these resumes would come in from HR, and I would get some that were like 5-6 pages long and just full of stuff. And I was like, and I had a stack of resumes to interview, and then I would come up to one, let's say like yours, Tyler, 1-pager summary of problems, how you resolved it. You really demonstrate how you're going to come and add value to my company. I was like, well, this one is staying on the pile, and then the rest of them I just quickly to the back pile, right? And then I call that person. So that's I think respect for that person's time is one of the key things too, is to get into their head and not waste their time with a resume that's full of fluff, but get really to their problem, what they're trying to solve, and map it out for them. And Andrew, I've seen this, and it's a common thread in all of our stories, right? When you were standing there at the virtual career fairs, you just wanted somebody to come and tell the story and help you with their storytelling, and you didn't want to pull it out of them.
Yeah, because looking at the resumes, it takes less than 10 seconds scanning through to see if the right keywords are there and if the right kind of projects are on there. So what I was always looking for and trying to draw out these conversations are, where's my conversation hook? Where's that project I can ask them about to tease out this info? So yeah, there's a resume is an exercise in summarizing the context you have for what you want to do. And it's really important to spend significant time on it, even if they're only going to look at it for a few seconds.
Yeah.
And tailor them. Don't spray and pray. Try your best to really research the companies that you're going to go apply to, and ensure, because those job descriptions are very, very verbose, right? So you can often tease out exactly what they're looking for right there, and make sure you go through and enter in some of those keywords there that's in the job description, because it's important, right? And we have to, like you said, Charles, learn some empathy for the people that have to go through these. And that comes across when you've demonstrated that you can effectively communicate your worth and your skills.
Oh my gosh. And yeah, like you said, the empathy for the time that goes. So I used to dread, because I'm trying to get my job done, managing a project manager group. And then I had to read the stack of resumes and try to think through what questions I was going to ask for each one, who to bring in. And then I would have to allot a full day of my time and then people in the group's time to spend talking. And DePauli, I think your point is great, is, it's time on both sides. Like, you don't want to spend time driving into an employer and then feel like they were just like, oh, I just had to check a box, but we really weren't gonna hire you anyway. Or on the flip side, I bring somebody in and they haven't done any research and they don't know anything about my company, and then I waste a half hour, of my time too. Is if everybody can kind of look at the other side and see what they're trying to do and get to that point faster, it saves everybody a whole bunch of time, right? So, and this leads me, I'm going to share my screen real quick. Being data-driven person that I am, what I did, and this is a great trick for, kind of a hack, and since I love data, is I went into Indeed.com, and this is based on what you were talking about, Tyler, is putting keywords in your resume, making sure people can check those check boxes and know that you have the skills and work on these skills ahead of time, right? So what I did when I was doing project management, I would go into Indeed.com, look up jobs, and pull out the keywords and job descriptions on Indeed and LinkedIn, and I would put them into a spreadsheet. It doesn't even have to be fancy. Of course, I use Power BI here, but you can put it in Excel and just map out. It's like, okay, if somebody is looking for a business intelligence person, these are the top skills that are mentioned in job descriptions for that job, right? And I did the same thing for project management, and that's how I learned about the PMP certification. And then I learned that was one of the check boxes a lot of companies check, is like, does this person have a PMP? So then I could pursue that before I went into that interview and say, hey, I've signed up for the test, I've done blah, blah, blah. And then here's the other thing. Then it makes the interview for the hiring manager or the HR person so much more fun, because you go through these, yeah, I know this skill, I know this skill, I know this skill. You get through the check boxes. Like as a hiring manager, I'm like, I'm done with the check boxes. I'm done. You obviously have done some research on my company. So star is done. So I can see that you demonstrate, good behavior and problem solving. And then what you can do is get into the relational building and what their passion is, what their interests in, and really build a relationship. And then your chances of getting hired just go through the roof at that point, because you got through the keywords. You did your research up front. So this is a hack. This is a trick I've done, and it makes interviews so much more enjoyable. So anyways, so Dipali was asking. So Dipali has helped me. She wrote a Python script, used natural language. So I was doing this manually, and what Dipali did, yeah, I was doing this manually. Dipali wrote a Python script for me and automated this. So I went from like 20 job descriptions to Dipali. I think, how many thousands? Did you do hundreds or thousands?
I think there was 4,000 something, between 4,000 to 5,000.
Cool.
Awesome. And I told Dipali, I was like, this is incredible work. We need to publish this stuff because we can take each type of job description, have Dipali run their script through it, and then we could like, if you want a job in this, here's the top skills you need. Go get these, and you'll have a better chance of getting that job.
And that's perfect. That's a perfect segue, right? Portfolio for people who want to get jobs in data analytics should have portfolios. I firmly believe, whether it's Tableau or Power BI, take some time to go out and find one of the many publicly available data sets, whether it be on Kaggle or whatever. Take some time to be able to demonstrate your dashboarding and reporting skills, and have projects to talk about, right? Even if you're not a professional yet and you're just in college, take one of those college projects farther than you normally would have, and turn it into something that you can publicly show to other people and demonstrate online. I have a Tableau public profile myself, so that's been huge to be able to demonstrate that, because people want to see. You can talk all day in an interview, but being able to demonstrate that the skills exist is something huge. So
and just to piggyback off that, so what I stumbled upon that too is people want to see your dashboards. They want to see your visuals. They want to see that you've done this before. So I created a rate sheet too. I developed a rate sheet, and it gave them options. You could do the hourly or the block of hours, but under each one, I also spelled out the scope, because they wanted to see, in a list, what I would provide, what value I provide. So I kind of got ahead of the game, and I created this sheet with all of my services kind of listed and the options in blocks. And then in the next few pages, you'll love this, I had examples, like a screenshot of some dashboards I had done. And then I did the STAR method. So I wrote out the problem, the solution, and then the results, kind of the data translation. That's what's missing in a lot of data analytics too, is they create the visual, but the person creating the visual doesn't have the domain name knowledge to translate it into profits or a result or a improvement in the process. They just have a great looking graphic. So you need that last part, which is, where some of the domain, some of our experience, we can apply from automotive or wherever we've worked. We now have both sides of the skill set, is we can develop the visuals and the data model, and then we can translate it and really add value to the companies too. So yeah, I've had so much good luck with that sheet of visuals, examples, and the star, the story behind the visuals. Yeah. So no, that's a great point, Tyler. Thank you for that. So Dipali or Andrew, anything to add before we go to our next one?
Especially in the age of ATSs, applicant tracking systems, having the right keywords on your resume is kind of that first gate that you have to get through when everything's an online application. And of course, you shouldn't put keywords on your resume if you're not able to speak to the basics of those things. So like, if you put SQL on your website and you can't talk about what a left join, right join, and all those types of things are, that's gonna go poorly for you.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are so many job descriptions that when I was in college I would apply to that you don't check all the boxes for, and that actually is just like a normal thing to do. And I think a lot of people are afraid to apply to a job description where they don't hit, 95 to 100% of the things that they're looking for. And the challenge on the company side is there's a large body of work that you're trying to get accomplished that needs a lot of different people, and you have to come up in your brain with how you want to split up those roles that need to be done. When you look at your team makeup, nobody fits in those boxes
Yeah.
already on other projects. So it's just kind of like this really crude way to organize how you anticipate somebody contributing to a team. So if you don't have all those check boxes, don't be afraid to apply. That's where the storytelling comes in, where you can show where you bring in unique value, because there's going to be 100 people applying for the same job that your resumes and skill sets probably look largely the same. But somebody who's able to communicate that value and show examples, there's just so much more confidence in hiring somebody like that than just looking at a resume going, well, they checked 9 out of 10 boxes and everybody else only had 8. So there's my candidate. Yeah, that's not the way it's done.
Wow, Andrew. So, I mean, just listening to you talk and everybody talking right now, maybe we should revamp resumes, and create.
Absolutely.
I mean,
there's a startup. I don't know if they're a startup, but Degreed is a company I've been starting to track in the last couple of months here after getting connected to a few people there. And that's one of their things is get rid of the resume. They have a whole platform for upskilling the workforce. So might be worth a check if you're interested in this type of stuff.
Yeah, interesting. Because I mean, now that I think back, the hours I spent reviewing resumes, but what I was really searching for was, it was a game of keywords. Like I put them in the job description. I mean, HR said you have to have a job description. So I was like stuffing these with keywords. I was looking online, like, what does a data analyst? What does a project manager typically have skill? And then I was stuffing it. And then I'm guessing on the other side, they're like, well, I got to get past the gatekeeper and to this hiring manager. So I'm going to stuff it with keywords so I can get to the next level. And all I was really, really searching for was demonstration of problem solving skills and the ability to define the problem or our problem, the company, the ability to understand the company's problems, come up with a solution and get positive results for the company. That's really what I was looking for, but it really wasn't conveyed in the resume. Is I think what we're all trying to, a lot of that is not on the resume, which is very, very interesting. So, let me.
Go ahead. I was saying that I had an interesting conversation with an employer in one of the virtual career fairs a couple of weeks ago. So this was a text-based virtual career fair, not a visual career fair. So what he did is that he said, okay, I'm just going to be here for maybe the next 40 minutes. And even he was getting a little text-based conversation. So he just put a Zoom link and he was like, okay, those of you who want to talk to me face-to-face, you can just jump on the Zoom link and have a conversation. I think that was very nice for both us and for him. And when we jumped on the Zoom link, he was like, okay, so I don't believe in resumes. I don't believe in just seeing keywords. I want to know you in person. And then when we talked to him a little, he gave us his link to book a slot with him for further conversation. And interestingly, even he has a startup based in Toronto. So when I talked to him, I talked about what I'm doing at SolisMatica and the kind of problems that smaller companies face and all of that. So I was able to build a connection with him by the stories that I did not have on my resume. And sometimes that helps both the employer and the employee immensely. So having that personal conversation is very important at times. And talking about the skills that I think Andrew and Tyler both talked about a little about, just putting SQL on a resume and not knowing it well. There are chances that you might have learned SQL maybe in your freshman year or your second year of college, and you might have forgotten a few basic concepts like left join and all of that. I think it's a good idea to go back and practice those. There are several websites right now. They have a lot of little questions that you can go and you can take quizzes and refresh all of those concepts. And especially for data jobs, these things are very important. SQL and a bit of math. You remember your base theorem, remember the central limit theorem, and all of those little things that we sometimes forget. We know them, but we sometimes forget. So it's a good idea to just refresh all of those before you really go for that interview.
Yeah, no, that's some great points. Thank you, Dipali. I think you're right. And I remember SQL. I've tried to write them, refresh and write them in. I think you could write some SQL queries in Access too. But I remember it was at Purdue where I took the last class. But that knowledge is still there, back of my mind. But it was so important, and I'm still using it now because I'm understanding how Snowflake, how normalization works, and why Power BI is structured differently from a relational database. But if I hadn't had that class years ago and a little bit of practice along the way, I think I would be so lost with some of the data, the structure, the star schema, and stuff like that. So, but that's a good point. Is if you don't know it, it's dangerous to put it on there because you'll get to that end state. And the hiring manager is like, wow, okay, you just did this to get past the gatekeeper. Now you're wasting my time. But if you have some of it and you can refresh yourself and you can demonstrate that in the interview, it's like, hey, I understand how left joins work and I refreshed it. I took this class, and you can say, now I can bring some of this knowledge back and help you solve problems. I think that hiring manager is like, okay, this person has potential because they're pulling from different places to solve the issues that I have. So, really good stuff. So we're getting on 52 minutes. This is every time I have one of these live shows, I'm like, how do we get to 50 minutes?
Time just flies.
But the conversation today was so awesome. I think, I think we're really going to help. I mean, some of the insights today, I think they're very timely with the virtual stuff, with, how keywords are searching, because that's all I do for my YouTube channel right now is I research keywords. I understand how resume works. And I think that was a great discussion about why resumes are kind of getting obsolete because of the game with keywords that's being played, right? The real intent behind resumes and behind hiring people that have good behaviors to solve the company's problems is getting lost. So let's do roundtable real quick. So I'm just going to do one more tip, which I kind of mentioned, is the follow-up question. This goes back to the story that people have in their heads. And if I went through an interview, I found that the question of what are the next steps if you think that I'm a good candidate was one of the best questions, because I can kind of tell from their reaction is after the whole interview, they've listened to my star stories, they've seen my work and stuff. And then when you pose that question, it paints that picture in their head of, okay, now I'm making a decision in my head. Do I want to have this person go the next step? And then they start thinking about that. It's like, okay, if I do the next step, I'm going to have to tell HR, I'm going to have to do this approval process. And they take those steps in their head at that moment when you ask it, right? And I had really good success at being able to gauge, okay, is this interview going to turn into a job? Are they interested in stuff? Based by watching their reaction. So maybe we just go round table with that is, was there a good question that you were able to ask during an interview that elicited a really interesting response or helped you get that job? But for me, it was, what are the next steps in this? And I had to time it, to kind of watch the reaction to see, okay, am I in or not? Which bin did I, did Andrew put me in the no interview bin, or did he put me in the call him up again?
Who are we starting with?
I think
Okay, let's go to Polly.
Okay. The interviews that I have gone for till now was when I was not actively seeking an employment. So one question that I always asked was feedback. How do you think I did in this interview? So I think that is when I was just learning how to talk during interviews, and that feedback was very useful to me. So just to know what I did well and what I did not do so well, and then work on things that I did not do well. I think that has helped me a lot till now.
Wow, Dipali, that is a great one, because I remember doing those before, and I learned a few of them would admit it's like, Charles, we're just here at Rose just to practice interviewing, because we're not, we haven't really come to Rose before, and this was just kind of a practice for us, and and he gave me honest feedback, so he kind of let me know that there probably wasn't a job at the end of this, which I appreciated. I was like, okay, you're being honest. He was trying to learn something. I was trying to learn something. So we had this really honest discussion about what I can do to improve for my next interview. And we kind of said, okay, this one's kind of done. But I really appreciated that he let me know that. And then, I got some great feedback for my future interviews. So no, that's a good point is, if you're comfortable and you feel like it's going well, maybe ask for, future stuff. But the flip side is you don't want to give him an indication that, you're done with this interview and you're moving on. So there's a case-by-case analysis, I think, on that one. So,
Yeah,
so Andrew or Tyler?
Yeah. So I like both of those, asking for feedback. But one of the questions that I usually like to ask is what brought them to the company and what they like about being there. Partially because I think sometimes people who are in career services trying to help candidates, do stuff and get jobs, they almost try to play a game of like stump the recruiter, right? Like research the companies and come up with really intelligent questions that they don't even know the answer to, and that makes you look great. And I never really bought into that because at least at Michigan Tech, the thing that they always promoted was people hire people. And one of the best ways you get to know if this is a company that you want to work for, because interviews are both ways. It's not just them hiring you, you're hiring them as well, is to find out their story. Like what brought them there? What's keeping them there? What's doing, like, what do they love about it? And oftentimes that curiosity can also just really open up a really good personal relationship with the person you're interviewing with, which can make all the downstream stuff much simpler. Like if you decide you're going to negotiate an offer or are trying to solicit feedback a little bit later, having the good personal connection can make those conversations go a lot better because you have a foundation of trust.
Yeah. No, that is a great point. I mean, we've talked so much about storytelling, but we've talked about it more from our standpoint. But what you just stated there is the hiring manager, the HR person, they all have stories too. And they appreciate it when you say, well, what is your story? What brought you here? Why do you like it here? And sometimes I've had experiences where during the interview, they talk about, passions and volunteer work they do. And then you make a connection. It's like, oh, I belong to the same club, or I do that too. And, and then you make this personal connection at a much deeper level, a human, relationship building that helps you in the future. Cause you have two people that trust each other and know each other's stories and can relate. I think relate is a huge thing. Making ballet relatable is one of your things. So Yep. So making people relatable and understand each other and other sides and recruiters. I think that's a big thing for our audience today is recruiters are people too, and they have stories too.
It's so good.
Yeah. Don't play stump the recruiter.
Yeah. Nobody likes that game. It's a lot of work for the candidate, and the recruiter doesn't feel good at the end of it either.
Yeah.
It just doesn't do anything for anybody.
Yeah, it's not a great game. All right. So, and Tyler, we'll end with you. And, and if you want, I think your networking thing was on spot, and maybe we do a whole nother chat show on networking and how important that is. And that ties to this one because of the relationship building, right? You're out there really networking and building connections and demonstrating your story. I think a lot of networking gets a bad rap. It's like, oh, I'm going out and schmoozing people and I have to work the room and stuff. And, you know, one of the things I found is I actually go to networking events and I find one or two people to build a really strong and good relationship, and I ask for their stories. So usually I just go and say, hey, what's your story? And then when I find something that I can relate to, I build a relationship with them. And it's much, much easier, much more rewarding than you know, working the room and meeting everybody is my experience. But yeah, like what are your ending thoughts for somebody on this along the lines of networking, maybe, or whatever you think is most important? Yeah.
So for me, I don't actually spend a whole lot of time asking about like what the next steps are. I kind of split it into two different approaches. So
Yeah.
first, I really try and read the room or read the Zoom, as I like to say. And I typically don't ask a lot of follow-up questions if I'm not getting the impression that the interview really went anywhere. I didn't have a big connection with the interviewers. To me, I think there's a lot to be said about first impressions, especially in an interview. And so if you're not feeling it, they're probably not feeling it. And so I tend to, you know, maybe not ask a lot of questions. But if you are really interested in the company and the interviewers, take as much time as you can learning about those interviewers as you possibly can. Learn about what the vision is for the role. Where does where is the company going? How do the people interviewing you feel about the company going forward? Now, a lot of times you're not going to get totally transparent answers, but a somewhat emotionally intelligent person will be able to kind of tease that out and get the real impression for how your interviewers feel about their jobs. And so the second part of it is the follow-up email. Most interviews now are going to be virtual, and those come in either on an email or some sort of Zoom invite. So get their email address and take the time afterwards to follow up, say thank you for your time, because they're spending at least an hour with you, right? At the very least. So thank them for their time. You know, express genuine interest in the job if you still are interested, and kind of pick out some key things that really impressed you about that role and that company. And I think that goes a long way to kind of solidifying your the image of you in their minds. And I think also don't be afraid to not know an answer in an interview. Take the opportunity in that follow-up email to answer any questions or re-clarify something you don't feel you answered well, because that also shows that you are someone who can take not just feedback, but also can look in the mirror, right, and really be introspective. And so I think that it's totally appropriate in an email to say, I don't know, but let me take some time to go look up that for you, and I will respond in an email, you know, as a follow-up to this. So I think that shows a lot of emotional intelligence to be able to be okay with not knowing everything and not being the smartest guy in the room, and or gal, excuse me, and really take an opportunity to go research and follow up again. And I'd say those make huge impressions for people to get that follow-up email.
Oh, wow. So thank you, Tyler. Yeah, I think just a couple points. The follow-up, you know, being able to say you don't know, understanding their reaction, the recruiter or the hiring manager. So if they get upset about it, you have a data point. You like, okay, this is a person that doesn't accept, you know, that other people can fail and can do research and stuff. So it's a great data point. It's like, oh, maybe I don't want to work here or something like that too, right? So that's a great question, or a great answer to a question is, I don't know, but I will research. And if they're accepting of that, then you kind of learn that style, that behavior from that person who could be your boss, right? So no, interesting stuff. And then your other point of reading the room, or reading the Zoom, which is a great one.
Yeah, I love
that. I've found that's a new skill that I've discovered lately. And this is actually, yeah, Andrew was helpful in doing this, because I go around and I talk to groups, or I was doing this before, where I would talk to a room of like 10 to 20 people about business intelligence, data analytics, and I would show stuff on, and every once in a while, as you watch, somebody's eyes would light up, right? And somebody would start asking questions, and really good, deep questions. And the funny story is, Andrew, that's kind of how we met. Is I was explaining what I was doing with SolisMatica and my company, and Andrew was in the crowd, and he started asking questions about, well, I think he asked, with data visualization, you can do some quick stuff to get some quick measure or some quick visualizations, but the real work, the real data modeling takes longer. How do you reconcile that with the end customer? Because now they've seen these quick visuals and they're like, well, why was this so fast? Why am I paying you so much money? Why are you taking all this time now to build this crazy thing called a star schema when I already see the results, right? I saw that in the room when Andrew looked at me that one time, right? And then we connected ever since then. So what you were talking about is a lot of times with body language, with how people answer questions, you can tell if somebody is resonating with you, relating with you, with your stories. And that goes a long ways in terms of helping you gauge, should you follow up? Is this a good group that I can work with, and we'll get along, basically. So
it's an art. It takes a while to figure out, and a lot of presenting. It took me a long time to get that emotionally intelligent to be able to notice undertones and kind of be able to, and it very simply is read the room and read that person and kind of learn how to empathize. It takes a lot of practice, and not everyone's great at it, but it is something we as humans need to practice for sure.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So 1 hour and 7 minutes. Tyler, Andrew, DePauli, thank you so much. I think we need to do a follow-up to this one once again. But all these videos are being recorded and uploaded to my YouTube channel. I'm trying to get to 100 views, and I'm just trying to create useful content for these tough times. And I'm trying to help everybody with some insights, how to get jobs, how to get into the data field. Because I really do believe data we're in, the upward part of the curve. I think this is going to last for a long time. I've heard some estimates of 50 years. We're going to be in this data revolution. And I want other people to join and experience this, because it's been a very happy experience for me for the past year. So it sounds like people are nodding. So it's been great for other people too. So, all right. So I'm going to end the broadcast. We'll say bye to the audience, but let's hang out for a second to recap. So thanks for listening in. Bye, everyone.
Guys,